Crystal McDowell's life was full of turmoil and adversary from the beginning. Born to parents who had named her after the drug crystal meth, she faced a challenging childhood. Her parents, who died within 6 months of each other when Crystal was just 11 years old, succumbed to complications from AIDS, which they contracted through substance abuse. This tragic loss left Crystal orphaned and left to fend for herself. In her teenage years, Crystal faced even more hardships. She was abducted by a man and held captive in a chicken coop, where she was sexually assaulted for several days. However, Crystal displayed incredible strength and resilience, escaping and evading her captor. Eventually, Crystal made her way to Baytown, Texas, where she found refuge with her aunt and uncle. Despite enduring the abuse she suffered as a child, Crystal was determined to make a better life for herself. She worked tirelessly to overcome her struggles and break free from the shackles of her past. It was in Baytown that Crystal met Steve McDowell. Steve, known for his playful nature and love for video games and fast cars, was everything Crystal longed for. His sweet, kind, and funny demeanor won her over instantly. Crystal's friends couldn't help but notice how happy she seemed to be with Steve. They thought Crystal and Steve made a perfect couple. Crystal worked as a flight attendant with ExpressJet, which allowed her and Steve to take frequent trips all over the USA, enjoying the benefits of her airline perks. After they married, Crystal and Steve had 2 children, Madden and Maui. It was evident that Crystal loved them deeply. She was a dedicated mother who prioritized her children's happiness and well-being. From the outside, it appeared that Crystal and Steve and their children were the perfect family. However, hidden beneath the surface, Crystal was growing increasingly dissatisfied with her marriage. After 10 years of marriage, she decided to end her relationship with Steve. This decision was met with resistance from her husband, who did not like the idea of a divorce. While Crystal waited for the keys to her new home, which was being remodeled, she continued to live with Steve and their children. It was a challenging situation for all of them as they navigated the emotions of a pending divorce. Despite the difficulties, Crystal remained determined to create a better future for herself and her children. By 2017, Crystal had turned 37 years old. She had made significant changes in her life, pursuing a career in real estate. This time marked a new chapter for Crystal, as she was looking forward to new beginnings in her new home. On August 25, 2017, Crystal had plans to meet up with her family to watch the highly anticipated Mayweather and McGregor fight. Excitement was in the air as friends and family gathered to watch the highly anticipated match. However, Crystal never showed up. Initially, no one seemed to worry too much about Crystal's absence. They knew that she was busy juggling her responsibilities as a working mother. Perhaps she was just running late, or had encountered some unexpected circumstances. However, as the night went on and Crystal failed to reply to texts and calls, concern started to grow. After waiting more than 24 hours without hearing from Crystal, her family made a heartbreaking decision. They contacted the Chambers County Sheriff's Department to report her missing. A deputy was immediately dispatched to Crystal's home, where he questioned her ex-husband, Steve. Upon his arrival, the deputy questioned Steve about Crystal's whereabouts. Steve, who had recently been divorced from Crystal, informed the detectives that Crystal had begun a new relationship after their separation. He said that there were nights when Crystal would disappear without informing him of her whereabouts. As he spoke to Steve, something in his tone caught the detective's attention. The deputy, with his keen intuition, had suspicions about Steve. With mounting concern, the deputy decided to call for backup. A seasoned detective arrived at the scene and joined the deputy. Upon speaking with Steve, the detective noticed his wedding band still on his finger. This odd detail piqued his interest, as Crystal and Steve had been divorced for 6 months. Although Steve was cooperative, the detective noticed something off about his demeanor. Given the unusual circumstances surrounding Crystal's disappearance, the detective involved the district attorney. The district attorney, having read the reports, immediately suspected foul play. With mounting evidence pointing towards a possible homicide, she ordered further investigation. One fact that caught the district attorney's attention was that Crystal and Steve were divorced, yet still living together. Furthermore, Crystal had a new boyfriend. The DA's first thought was that Steve had something to hide. Despite the initial speculation, the detective on this case had a different option. While it was possible that Steve could have played a role in Crystal's disappearance, the detective believed there were other factors to consider. The detective believed that Crystal's boyfriend could provide valuable insight into her disappearance. Crystal's disappearance puzzled the detectives as they sought to uncover the truth behind her disappearance. They learned that the man she had gone out with on August 24, 2017, was Paul Hargrave, a local man who managed a jewelry store that had been a fixture in the neighborhood for over 50 years. According to Paul, he and Crystal had gone out together that night, and upon her return, she went back to his house with him. The following morning, while Paul was in the shower, Crystal left his home. Paul provided security camera footage of Crystal leaving his residence on August 25 at 7:35 a.m. The video showed Crystal getting into her black Mercedes coupe and driving away from Paul's driveway. Steve McDowell and Paul Hargrave were immediately considered suspects in Crystal's disappearance. However, the detectives realized that other potential persons of interest still needed to be investigated further. As the detectives delved into the case, they uncovered some intriguing details about Crystal's marriage. It was discovered that throughout her marriage, Crystal had engaged in multiple extramarital affairs with flight attendants and pilots, both male and female. The discovery of these extramarital affairs raised suspicions among the detectives. They wondered if there was a possibility that an angry spouse had gone after Crystal, seeking revenge. However, there was no evidence that these affairs had anything to do with her disappearance. The investigation into Crystal's disappearance hit a dead end when Hurricane Harvey made landfall in Baytown. This massive storm caused widespread devastation, with half the county submerged in floodwaters. The heavy rain continued for days, making it difficult for the investigation to proceed. Crystal's disappearance became overshadowed by the hurricane and its aftermath. People lost their homes, cars, and even their lives in the storm's destruction. The Chambers County Sheriff's Department faced limited resources and was forced to redirect all personnel to assist in the hurricane search and rescue efforts. With the attention of the officers supposed to be working on Crystal's case diverted to the hurricane response, her family was responsible for picking up the investigation. Friends and family members spent the days tirelessly sharing posts about Crystal's disappearance on various social media platforms, such as Facebook and Instagram. They spread the word far and wide, hoping to gather any leads or information that would lead to her whereabouts. One of Crystal's cousins received a message from a friend. The friend informed them that they had recently seen a Snapchat image depicting Crystal's vehicle parked in a Motel 6 parking lot near Interstate 10. Intrigued by this claim, Crystal's cousin immediately sought to verify the information. Upon seeing the Snapchat image, they recognized the license plate and confirmed that it was indeed Crystal's car. With the confirmation, Crystal's cousin immediately informed her family and the police about the potential lead. However, due to severe flooding on the roads in Chambers County, reaching the site of the motel proved challenging. Instead of traditional vehicles, they opted to use airboats to navigate through the flooded areas. Upon arriving at Motel 6, Crystal's family and the police were met with a sight that confirmed their worst fears. Her car was parked haphazardly in the parking lot with the keys in the ignition. It appeared that whoever left Crystal's car there did so with the intention of having it stolen. The Mercedes was subsequently towed to the crime lab garage for processing, but regrettably, no evidence was found that could shed light on Crystal's whereabouts. Even Dateline, the popular news television investigation series, dedicated segments to Crystal's disappearance. But unfortunately, these efforts did not yield any relevant information. 1 week after Crystal's disappearance, the detective realized he needed additional assistance in the aftermath of Hurricane Harvey. He reached out to the Texas Rangers, who gladly provided their assistance. The lead Texas Ranger assigned to the case conducted the first formal interview with Steve McDowell, Crystal's husband. Steve stated that he had not seen Crystal since she had left for her date on August 24th. From the very beginning, Steve's body language appeared peculiar to the Ranger. Despite Crystal's sudden disappearance, Steve did not exhibit the palpable worry one would expect from someone in such a situation. However, Crystal's friends and family remained steadfast in their support of Steve. Crystal's loved ones knew Steve personally and felt that he could not possibly be responsible for Crystal's disappearance. They emphasized his loving nature as a father to Madden and Maui, doubting that he would ever do anything to hurt their mother. The Ranger approached Steve and asked if he would be willing to take a lie detector test. Steve agreed, seemingly confident in his innocence. However, the results of the test were shocking. Steve failed miserably, raising even more questions about his involvement in Crystal's disappearance. Paul Hargrave, Crystal's boyfriend, who was also considered a potential suspect, also took a polygraph test. Just like Steve, Paul failed the lie detector test. With both Steve and Paul failing the lie detector tests, the district attorney started to wonder if there was a possible joint effort to conceal the truth about Crystal's disappearance. By this stage, everyone involved was convinced that foul play was involved and that Crystal was deceased. However, there was one important question that remained unanswered. Where was her body? If her remains had been disposed of in one of the bayous in Baytown, there was a high likelihood that her body would have been transported to the Gulf of Mexico, making it virtually impossible to discover. In an effort to locate Crystal and bring closure to her family, a search was organized that involved Texas EQUA search team and volunteers. The search took place on September 9th, with close to 100 people participating in the search efforts. The searchers adopted a grid-based approach, dividing the area into sections and systematically covering each foot by ATV and airboat. Despite the extensive efforts put forth by everyone involved, no sign of Crystal could be found. As the search continued into the wetlands, the Texas Rangers remained steadfast in their determination to find those responsible for Crystal's disappearance. They worked tirelessly to piece together the events and piece together a potential motive behind Crystal's disappearance. The possibility arose that her ex-husband or her boyfriend could have been involved, although no evidence was found to support this theory. The ranger, recognizing the potential for CCTV footage, had officers canvass the area around the motel where her car was discovered, searching for homes and businesses equipped with security cameras. Fortunately, several establishments had security cameras, and the ranger was determined to uncover any footage that might help shed light on Crystal's disappearance. After spending hours searching through countless hours of footage, the ranger came across footage of a person parking Crystal's car in the motel parking lot on Saturday, August 26 at 6:37 a.m. The footage provided a clear image of the man, but the ranger couldn't immediately identify the person. As the ranger continued his analysis of the footage, he noticed that the man in question got out of Crystal's Mercedes and walked away from the vehicle. With the suspicion that this person could be Crystal's ex-husband, Steve, the ranger's attention intensified. In a separate video captured 5 hours later by a different security camera, a blue car pulled into the pump at a gas station located next to Motel 6, and this blue car, a rare Mustang GT, matched the description of Steve McDowell's vehicle. That revelation strengthened the ranger's belief that the person seen parking Crystal's car at Motel 6 could have been Steve himself. Steve's actions at the gas station raised suspicion. Instead of filling his tank, Steve walked towards the Motel 6 parking lot, where he appeared to be looking at Crystal's car. The ranger speculated that Steve may have returned to the parking lot earlier to check if anyone had stolen Crystal's car. He had left the keys in the ignition, expecting someone to eventually take advantage and steal the vehicle. If Steve was responsible for her disappearance, how did he return home? The distance between the location where Steve parked Crystal's car and his home is significant, and Steve would have been on foot, making this an unlikely journey. So the ranger decided to take a closer look at the CCTV footage from surrounding businesses and homes to find any additional clues. Upon further investigation, the ranger discovered footage of a man riding a bike in the rain along the Interstate 10 service road at 7:05 a.m., approximately 25 minutes after Crystal's car was left in the parking lot. This bike had distinctive mag wheels and reminded the ranger of a similar bike he had seen in the McDowell garage. During one of his interviews with the ranger, Steve mentioned that he had been shopping at Walmart on Saturday morning. The ranger, intrigued, decided to review the CCTV footage from the store. This footage from Walmart, located across the street from Motel 6, revealed a peculiar sequence of events. A man resembling Steve was seen arriving at Walmart Saturday morning in a hooded sweatshirt, paying for a bike with mag wheels and cash just minutes after Crystal's vehicle was abandoned in the Motel 6 lot. Upon reviewing this evidence, the ranger decided to summon Steve back to the police department for a follow-up interview. During their encounter, the ranger confronted Steve with all the evidence they had gathered against him. However, Steve denied any involvement in Crystal's disappearance. Despite the denial, the ranger remained convinced that Steve was the killer. He was positive Paul Hargrave was innocent, and Steve was solely responsible for Crystal's disappearance. While the ranger believed they had sufficient evidence to charge Steve with murder, there was one crucial piece of evidence they still lacked: Crystal's body. The lack of physical remains hindered their efforts to establish a watertight case against Steve. One of the main reasons why the DA wanted to find Crystal's body was to secure a guilty verdict for murder. Without a body, proving a murder charge can be more challenging, as it relies on circumstantial evidence and witness statements. Having a physical body would strengthen the DA's case and provide concrete evidence to convince a jury. Furthermore, locating Crystal's body was crucial for the well-being of her family. Her loved ones deserved closure and needed to know what happened to her. The absence of answers was causing immense distress, and locating Crystal's remains would provide some relief and answers to their questions. Another factor that influenced the DA's decision to locate Crystal's body was a series of disturbing statements made by her ex-husband, Steve. People had informed the Texas Ranger that after Crystal filed for divorce, Steve made alarming comments about murder and taking his own life. The Ranger and the DA were concerned for the safety of Crystal and Steve's children, Madden and Maui. Given the potential dangers, the DA made the decision to remove the children from their father's custody and place them in protective services. In order to convince Steve to cooperate, the DA presented him with a counteroffer. The DA stated that if Steve was willing to take them to Crystal's body, they could reconsider allowing him to see his children again. However, Steve had a different proposal. He asked if he could go home that night and the following morning, promising that he would tell them everything and lead them directly to Crystal's body. This offer by Steve posed a dilemma for the DA. On one hand, it provided an opportunity to potentially find Crystal's body and uncover the truth. However, on the other hand, it would depend on Steve's reliability and willingness to cooperate. With a verbal agreement, the district attorney allowed Steve to return home that night, knowing they were taking a risk. The possibility existed that Steve might flee or harm himself, effectively leaving Crystal's fate unknown. However, the next morning, on September 9th, the DA and the Texas Ranger arrived at Steve's home. Steve answered the door, and during his interview with the Ranger and the DA, he shared his version of the events. Steve revealed that he was aware of Crystal's numerous affairs throughout their marriage. When he confronted her about these issues, Crystal made it clear that she wanted him to stay out of her business. According to Steve, Crystal told him that she had sought sex outside of the marriage because she felt he was not dominant enough in the bedroom. As the Ranger and the DA sought information about the day Crystal went missing, they employed a sympathetic approach to elicit a confession from Steve. The Ranger feigned empathy, hoping to create an environment that allowed Steve to feel comfortable and relaxed. They intended to obtain crucial details about what actually happened to Crystal on that fateful day. Despite their efforts, Steve remained tight-lipped about Crystal's disappearance. Eventually, Steve confessed. According to Steve, before her disappearance, Steve and Crystal had a heated argument. Crystal revealed to Steve that she no longer loved him, leading to a confrontation. Steve, reacting impulsively, admitted to suffocating Crystal. However, he claimed that he never intended to harm her and that the incident was purely accidental. Following Crystal's death, Steve took immediate action to conceal her remains. Steve confessed he wrapped her body in trash bags, placing it in the trunk of her Mercedes. He then drove to a secluded location where he threw Crystal's lifeless body into a ravine. Steve's willingness to lead the authorities to Crystal's body seemed to offer a glimmer of hope in an otherwise bleak situation. However, there was a catch. He stipulated that the death penalty be removed as a viable option in exchange for leading them to her remains. The district attorney, mindful of the futility of finding Crystal's body without Steve's cooperation, reluctantly agreed to his request. To unravel the mystery surrounding Crystal's disappearance, Steve accompanied the Ranger and the DA on the search. This path was Needle Point Road, a narrow street nestled amidst heavy wooded land. Eventually, the Ranger came upon Crystal's body. When it was found, the condition of the body was horrifying. Barely anything was left. After Steve was arrested and charged with Crystal's murder, it was revealed that the defense team of Steve was aiming to claim the sudden passion clause as a defense. This defense strategy allowed Steve and his team to blame Crystal's death on her alleged provocation, potentially reducing or dropping the murder charge altogether. In Texas, sudden passion refers to a state of mind characterized by intense emotions, such as rage or terror, that overwhelm an individual and result in impulsive and clouded thinking. To qualify for the sudden passion defense, the defendant must prove that the victim's provocation directly led to their actions. If Steve and his legal team succeed in presenting the sudden passion defense, the murder would be classified as a second-degree felony, carrying a sentence of 2 to 20 years in prison and a fine of up to $10,000. On the other hand, if convicted of first-degree murder, Steve would face a harsher penalty, with the possibility of serving 5 to 99 years in prison and a fine of up to $10,000. The sudden passion defense in Crystal's case ignited a debate among legal scholars and societal stakeholders. Critics argued that this defense strategy effectively blamed the victim for their own fate, disregarding the perpetrator's guilt. Supporters of the defense argued that it provides an outlet for individuals to take responsibility for their actions while still acknowledging mitigating circumstances. However, the DA believed that this was a clear case of premeditated murder. In order for the decision to be upheld, all 12 jurors needed to agree on this as well. After a year of pretrial hearings and motions, Steve's trial finally began in June 2019. The prosecution presented their case, aiming to convince the jury that Steve was indeed responsible for Crystal's murder. One key piece of evidence presented was Steve's confession to the authorities. This confession provided crucial information, helping to establish his guilt. Furthermore, the prosecution presented CCTV footage of Steve parking Crystal's car in the motel parking lot. In a heart-wrenching moment, Crystal and Steve's children were brought in to testify. Steve and Crystal's now 7-year-old daughter, Maui, took the stand and described to the jury what she witnessed the night her mother was killed. According to Maui, her parents were engaged in a heated argument about Crystal being with another man. She testified that during the fight, she saw her father place his hands over her mother's nose and mouth. Maui stated that she witnessed her mother struggling to breathe and eventually losing consciousness. After her mother stopped moving, Maui claimed that her father told her to stay inside her bedroom and not to tell anybody about what she had just witnessed. Maui explained to the court that she felt frightened and confused by what happened. In stark contrast to Maui's testimony, Steve's defense put forth a different version of events. They claimed that Maui learned about her mother's murder from Crystal's relatives and had created a fabricated story around it. The defense argued that Maui was repeating what she had been told and was not a reliable witness. Although defense attorneys advised against it, Steve ultimately took the stand in his own defense, recounting the events that led to her tragic demise. With tears streaming down his face, Steve presented a completely different version of events than what he told detectives during his confession. According to Steve, the night Crystal died unfolded in a sudden and unforeseen event. What started as a heated argument spiraled out of control, leading to an impulsive decision on his part. Frustrated, upset, and mad, Steve claimed that he resorted to violence in an attempt to calm her down. In a misguided effort to defuse the situation, he placed Crystal in a bear hug, hoping to restrain her and bring her back to a state of rationality. However, what happened next took him by surprise, Steve claimed. Crystal suddenly went limp in his arms. Steve testified that he had no idea what had happened, stating that he had never intended to harm her intentionally. The district attorney, hearing Steve's testimony, was left stunned. To the DA, the idea that he had effectively hugged Crystal to death seemed unfathomable. It was an unprecedented allegation that left the courtroom in disbelief. As the case went to the jury, the DA found himself worrying about the possibility of a mistrial. The jury's request to review Steve's confession video further heightened these concerns. A mistrial would mean starting the entire process over again, a prospect that weighed heavily on the prosecution's mind. 1 hour after the jury requested to see the footage, they returned, and their verdict was delivered. Jurors found Steve guilty of murder, delivering justice for Crystal. This guilty verdict brought a measure of closure to her family and loved ones, who had been left searching for answers amidst the darkness that enveloped their lives. During the sentencing phase, the defense put forth the argument that Crystal's murder was a sudden passion, an attempt to reduce the severity of Steve's punishment. However, the jury rejected this claim, choosing to uphold the severity of the crime. Steve was sentenced to serve a 50-year prison sentence.